All right, let's do this, I suppose. I just realized somehow we didn't get the link set up over in locals. For God's sake, O'Connor. All right, I'm going to set this up myself because I can multitask. It's one of the gifts of a fine radio talk show host. And I'm going to set this up now while I introduce myself if you don't know me already. Larry O'Connor here, and this is our live exclusive stream that we do once a week. I try to do at least one of these, although last week I did a couple of these. So, I mean, you never know. When you join our locals community, it's larryo'connor.locals.com. I might go live at any given time. And why shouldn't I, for God's sake? It's my page. It's my OC. We call it the OC. It's like our safe little haven. For you, those of you who don't know what locals is, it's basically a social media platform without Big Brother watching you at all times, right? I mean, that's really all we want. It's just like Facebook used to be before it got politicized. You can join it for free, and now we do have, and then you can become members of tons of people's communities like Dan Bongino and Dave Rubin and Andy No and Nick Searcy and Kurt Schlichter and Kira Davis, Tony Katz, and tons of people. And then, of course, all of us have some paid content that you can only get if you become a supporter, and we love our supporters. And then you get some extra special content. Now, right now, I've been doing most of my live streams, at least my primetime evening live streams, available to anyone who follows me on Facebook or on YouTube or Twitter or whatever. But pretty soon, these are all going to start becoming just for supporters at locals. But you get a ton of content there, a ton of interaction, and you really are part of a community by being part of our locals page. Hello, Sylvie. Sylvie from Waldorf is here, a longtime supporter of WMAL, the radio station I'm on in Washington, D.C. Hello, Tommy. Good to see you as well. So a couple of things that I have to set up here. This is, I can't believe I'm doing this. We do many live streams. We try each month to break down these live streams, usually on a Thursday night, usually around 6 or 7 p.m. We'll do a live stream here. Last week, we had an interview with Jack Carr, a former Navy SEAL, #1 New York Times bestselling author of a whole series of great thriller novels. We do long, and it was a half-hour interview. Here's what we do. What I try to do here are things that I can't do on the radio. I have some limitations on the radio. There's some subjects that I don't generally talk about on the radio. There are interviews that I would love to do that go well beyond the 8 or 9 minutes that I get with a guest. We've had interviews with guests that have gone 90, 120 minutes here. We call that long form, Larry. We also do book interviews with authors, as I mentioned, that go at least 30 to 60 minutes, sometimes even longer. We go in depth because I actually read books, unlike a lot of radio hosts. I read. And then this is what we call Larry Unplugged. Larry Unplugged is stories that are personal, things about my life that, again, I mean, I try to share as much as I can on radio, but not all of it is appropriate for radio. And frankly, not all of it necessarily are things that you might, the wide audience might care about. But some of my more loyal listeners might want to know these stories about me and my past. And this is one that's been in the making for a while. I've actually been alluding to my history with Val Kilmer for decades now. When I first started filling in for Dennis Miller over 10 years ago, I made mention of Val. I think Kurt Schlichter was on the show with me at the time as my guest, and I made mention of Val Kilmer. And I said, "Oh, I hate Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer is a terrible human being. I've had a horrible experience with Val Kilmer. Listen, anyone who knows me knows I don't use the word hate very much, professionally or privately. I hate Val Kilmer. And anytime anybody asks me, "Oh, you got to tell me your story of Val Kilmer," after I worked with Val Kilmer, which was in 2004, by the way, so it's coming on 18 years since this all happened. My son, who is 17 years old, he was born right after the show I worked on with Val Kilmer closed. So I always connect this with the birth of my son. And now he's, just finishing his junior year in high school. It's crazy how long it's been. But even after that, hello, Kate. Hello, Teresa. Hello, Carol and Linda. Oh, my goodness. Aunt Linda. Oh, my gosh. Okay, my aunt is listening from Oklahoma City. I got to watch myself. No, I'll be fine. Hello, Ball State alum, Jeffrey. Even after the show closed, like within a year, I would see my friend before I got into radio, before I was doing political commentary or what have you. Just a theater guy, just a guy who had just worked on a really big, notorious musical in Los Angeles with Val Kilmer. People would say, "Hello, Trisha." People would say, "What was it like working with Val Kilmer?" And I would always respond in the same way. Well, I'm going to have to tell you that story over cocktails. It's what I'd always say. Well, I'll have to tell you that story over cocktails. And I've never really gone around. I've alluded to it a little bit. I've told some anecdotes about my time working with Val Kilmer. But anytime people pry, it's not appropriate for radio necessarily, and it's not necessarily appropriate for most venues. But it just made sense tonight since Top Gun is back in the theaters and Val Kilmer is part of the American zeitgeist again, sorta. Meredith and I just watched the original Top Gun. We've not seen Maverick yet, but we plan to. Hear nothing but great things about it. We watched the original, and I kid you not, every time Val Kilmer was on the screen, I had this physical reaction. So I always say, I'll tell you the story about Val Kilmer, but only over cocktails. So let's do this right. And since we're talking about, a Top Gun star, Navy aviators and everything, I've chilled my glass. I've got my shaker ready. I've pre-measured my bourbon generously. I'll throw in a little sweet vermouth. Oh, yeah. Your mouth is watering right now, isn't it? Now, I'm going to make you wait for the whole Val Kilmer story. And I can't really tell it unless I've got a nice cocktail going. I'm going to go with a Manhattan. I know y'all figured it would be a martini. Kind of cliche, to be honest. And since I'm talking about my theater days, I think Manhattan is appropriate. Oh, yeah. I'll take Manhattan. Oh, yes. Oh, look how can you see how frothy that is right now? Ice has been sitting in that shaker for quite some time. I've also got some dried black cherries, which if you are making a Manhattan at home, please don't get one of those like cherry on top of an ice cream sundae cherries. That's just an abomination. That's for children. Get something sour with a nice sort of tartness to it. That's the kind of cherry you want for a Manhattan. Let's get this going here. Let's see if I measured properly. I usually over measure. Oh, yeah. Oh, do you see how well mixed that is? You see what's going on here? Do you see what I've done? Do you see how... Hello. Oh, you're going to think that I pre-measured this. I swear I didn't. It's my gift. I have a gift. Ladies and gentlemen, here's to June. Here's to summer. Here's to life. Here's to the United States Navy and all those great Navy aviators who keep us free and protect us. Yes, even Iceman, but not Val Kilmer. Here's to you. Here's to our nation. Yes. Now I can start telling the story. But I've got to preface this with many, many provisos. Now, first of all, for those of you who don't know, and you only know me from my presence on radio or writing columns from my early days at Breitbart starting in 2009, for most of my adult life, this is my second career. For most of my adult life, I worked in the professional theater business. I worked in New York for 5 years for the Schubert Organization, working as a child, really, right out of high school, honestly. I worked there through the years of Les Miserables and Phantom of the Opera and all these big shows that were on Broadway. And then a job opening popped up in Los Angeles at the Schubert Theater in Los Angeles. It's a theater that the company that I worked for owned in Century City. And I had grown up in California. Really, I moved there when I was 13 from Michigan. So Southern California was my home. And they knew that my company knew that I knew California. And so they asked me if I wanted this job as the assistant manager. So they sent me, what do you mean, where's Val? Val's not here. We didn't advertise that Val Kilmer would be here. I'm telling a story about Val. Actually, I'm telling many stories about Val Kilmer. If you came here looking for Val Kilmer, go elsewhere. I assure you. For all you Val Kilmer fans, this will be somewhat unsatisfying. Paula Puckett, my goodness. Speaking of Michigan, hello, Paula Puckett. So I love that this live stream is what attracts everybody. That I'm going to tell all the dirt and give out all the tea on Val Kilmer, who, by the way, is an awful human being. I know he's got throat cancer. I know there's a big documentary about him, and that everybody loves him now because no, he's a terrible person. Don't buy all of that. Don't believe Hollywood. Don't believe Hollywood. All right. So I move out to Los Angeles just to be the assistant manager of the Schubert Theater in Los Angeles. And then within 6 months, the general manager of the Schubert Theater in Los Angeles quit. She didn't want to do the job anymore. She had just been moved there with me, by the way. And she didn't like LA after 8 months. So she left. And then suddenly, at the tender age of, should I even say, I was 24 years old. And they made me the general manager of the Schubert Theater in Los Angeles, the biggest theater our company owned. This is right in the 90s when we had big musicals coming in. We did Sunset Boulevard, we did Beauty and the Beast, we did Ragtime, we did these huge shows, and it was huge. It was great, and I loved it, and I loved Broadway, and I loved musicals, and I loved all that. Um, Now, eventually, I got married, I started a family, had two children, and the schedule at the Schubert was not in keeping with family life necessarily, let's just say. And also, I recognized that in my career, I was going to have to move on. If I was going to progress in the career, I needed to not be affiliated with the Schubert itself, the theater, the venue anymore. I was their general manager, by the way. General manager represents the theater owner, with all the negotiations and finances and management, and also house management every night with the audience and tickets and all that stuff, right? But the Schubert Theater had a lease. Their lease was up in 2002, and it ended up getting shut down. It got knocked down. It was in Century City, for those of you in Los Angeles, on Avenue of the Stars. It's where the new CAA building is now, right across the street from the Century Plaza Hotel. So they knocked it down. The theater was shutting down, and I needed to move on with my career. I was a young man still. So I stayed in the theater business in Los Angeles, but I became a general manager for shows. So here's what happens in the theater business. You've got a theater, this is commercial theater, by the way. You've got a theater owner and you've got a producer, and the producer rents the theater, right? And the theater owner doesn't want to worry about the day-to-day management of the theater. So he hires a general manager, or they hire a general manager to run things for them. That was me for the Schuberts. Same thing with the producer. The producers want to raise money and they want to hire designers and they want to hang out with stars and stuff. They don't want to handle the day-to-day management of the show. So they in turn also hire a general manager. So for years I had been the general manager for the theater side of the business. I left and I started my own company with a friend of mine for a while, and then I ended up we parted ways for various reasons, all amicably, of course. And then I ended up taking on shows on my own a little later. I was the general manager for the producers. There would be producers. They'd have a great idea for a show. They'd raise the money for the show, but they'd never put on a show before. And I was one of the few people in Los Angeles at the time that had operated large shows at this scale. And I knew how to manage a show. So they hired me as the general manager. Does that make sense? That makes sense. So that was my life. This is well before radio. This is well before everything that you might know about me now. Although some people I can see in our chat here knew me from then too. So they're clearly here because they've been waiting to hear this story as well. All right. Yes, I know. I'm boring you all. This brings us to a fateful phone call I got from a person who was representing Max Osria. Now, do you know who Max Osria is? He's a fashion designer, BCBG Fashions. Anyone know BCBG Max Osria? You guys know that, right? It's true, John. I am the gayest straight man around. I appreciate that. I've always been called the gayest straight man around, or I'm the straightest gay man around. Either way, I'll own it. It's true. Love me some musical theater. And I think I dress pretty nicely. Anywho, BCBG Max Osria, a great, wonderful man. He fell in love with this French musical of the Ten Commandments. It was a very modern look at the Ten Commandments, and he is a very faithful Jewish man. Max Osria is, and he loved this story, and he loved that it was a modern reinterpretation, live stage production of the Moses story of Exodus. And he bought the rights. This was done in France originally. He bought the rights for North America. And they wanted to premiere this at what was then called the Kodak Theater in Los Angeles. Now I believe it's called the which is where they do the Oscars. I'm blanking on the name. It's not the Kodak. It's you know where it is. Anyway, I'm sure you'll tell me. So the Dolby. Thank you, Carol. The Dolby. I knew it. I see. This is the great thing about doing a live stream. If I blank out on a name, you all got it for me. So the Dolby Theater. But at the time, it was called the Kodak Theater. They're going to premiere it at the Kodak Theater. It's going to be a 12-week run. It's going to be a cast of 60. It's got a huge budget. And honestly, and they got these producers together, but they have no idea how to manage a show. So they hired me to run the show. So we start going through the process of auditions and casting, and we start developing the show, and I'm hiring people to come in and adapt the show. And they ended up, they bought the show from France, right? And the rights. But then they decided they wanted to hire a brand new composer, a brand new lyricist, they basically rewrote the whole show for an American audience. And they wrote the dude, they wrote someone who had never written a musical before. There's a good idea. But he did write. Where are we going with this? I'm telling you the story of Val Kilmer, but I got to give you background. They hired this pop artist. His biggest claim to fame is that he wrote the hit song from Madonna called Like a Prayer, right? You know that song. Oh, like a prayer. It's a very dramatic. If you think about it, it's a very theatrical song. It worked for Madonna. So they hire this guy to write this show. And things are going great, and we're going through auditions, and we're hiring actors, and some of them are familiar to you. You're going to see in a moment. But we couldn't find our Moses. We couldn't find the right guy to play Moses, the patriarch of the Judeo-Christian faith. We couldn't quite find the guy to play Moses. And someone, I'll never forget, when the representative, the producer, called me and said, "I've got great news. We found our Moses, Val Kilmer." Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, this is a musical. Does Val Kilmer sing? Ooh, well, that's part of the story. But what I need to do here is I need to show you that this was a legitimate show. This is a big production. It's and I want to show a lot. We ended up filming this, so there's a lot of clips on YouTube. And no, Kate, I did not dislike. I was excited about this. It's a big Hollywood star. He has a bit of a reputation, but that's okay. He's a big Hollywood star. It's a big name. It's going to sell tickets, and he's going to be great. He went to Juilliard, after all, a Juilliard actor, so he's going to be a pro. All right. So what I want to do is I want to show you a scene from this show. Now, this is a scene. Now, I'm not showing you Val Kilmer yet. He might be in this scene. I don't think he is, though. This is the moment when the Israelites have made it through the Red Sea. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert, the Hebrews escape the Egyptians. And Miriam, the part of Miriam is played by Allison Porter. Now, so this is a great cast. Allison Porter was originally the young child actress in Curly Sue, remember? And she's a wonderful singer, a great person. She ended up winning The Voice, actually. She won The Voice like 6 or 7 years ago. So this is a scene with Allison. And hopefully the audio will work. Sometimes the audio doesn't work on these things. So here is it, because I just want you to understand the scale and quality of this show. Here is here's the scene real fast here. And if you can't hear this, please let me know. You should be able to hear the music, right? Can you? Just let me. Can you hear the music? No one's letting me know if you can hear the music. Just give me a yes. We can hear the music. All right.
Of a new day, someone must have heard me cry, so look down from the sky. Said salvation's on the way, and a breeze to touch my face in the first breath of a new day. Oh, we are free, we are free. Yeah, we're free like the dove that rides the wind above the troubled sea, like the rope moving. The next place it should be. Oh, we are free, we are free. Yeah, we're free. There's a rhythm in my spirit, connects to my feet. My soul can hear a song that is crying.
I remember one of the reviewers actually pointing out that these are the sexiest, hottest looking Hebrew slaves you will ever see in your lifetime. This is a damn good looking cast. I mean, these are LA singers and dancers and actors, okay? I mean, and Max Azria, BCBG Max Azria, he knows how to dress a sexy woman. I mean, this was a great looking cast. And if you notice, it's a nice song. It's a quality production. It's well done. Do you notice who's not in this scene? That'd be Val Kilmer. All right.
Shining like a perfect jewel, this land we're going to, where the milk and honey flow. Realize we're going home in the first light of a new day. We are free, we are.
All right, so you get the picture. This is not a schlocky production we're talking about here. This is a high quality Broadway production. Well, pre-Broadway, we weren't quite in New York yet, but this is a good show. Okay. And by the way, for those purists out there, this is 100% biblical. This is exactly how it happened in Exodus. Well, no, seriously. If you read it, when they get through the Red Sea and the Egyptian soldiers are killed, Miriam and the Hebrews sing with their timbrel and instruments. And that's all they sing and dance and celebrate. That's all they're doing. They're just doing it in a very sort of enticing way because it's Broadway and you gotta give the people what they want. All right, so I lay that out there to let you know that this was not a schlock amateur production. We were doing it right, and we bring in Val Kilmer, and these are great actors, by the way. Cast of 60, fantastic singers, fantastic actors. In fact, here I'll show you one more. This is a This is a guy that we cast in the show to play Joshua. Now, you are going to see Val Kilmer in this scene. This is the scene where Moses is overseeing the Hebrew slaves building the pyramids. You know the story, don't you? Spoiler alerts, right? So here's Val Kilmer as Moses. He's not going to sing here. He's not going to even act. He's not doing anything. He's just standing there being Val Kilmer, which I got to be honest, to give him his due, he was good at that. He was really good at standing there being Val Kilmer. Here is a scene with this actor that we hired. He was totally unknown. Never heard of him, but he walked in and auditioned. And if I remember right, he sang a cappella. I think he sang it was a Bon Jovi song that he sang. I can't remember which Bon Jovi song it was. And he blew us all away. He absolutely blew us away, this kid. And when you see him singing, you will recognize who he is. But again, tells you what a great cast it was. Here is that actor. Look at this great production here. There's Val, right? Look at that. We got the Sphinxes.
Father, can you hear me? Your God hears you, Joshua, and makes you a slave of the Pharaoh. They say I've got no right to question a life without hope, or ask for anything more than just.
We want to go full screen on this. Do you recognize who that is? Anybody?
They say I've got no right to look them in the eye, that I belong in the dust of their feet. One day for sure I'm gonna die. Is anybody listening? Does anybody hear? Does anybody out there see us drowning in our tears? Is our future written on the sky of golden stone? God, if you're listening, let us know.
All right, seriously, you guys don't recognize him? You don't know who that is? All right, hold on. I'll fast forward to the end where he really lets loose. You got it. I mean, if you don't recognize who he is, he was young here. but you'll recognize the voice. Hang on.
The spirit flies, my spirit flies. Is anybody out there? See us drowning in our fear. Will our host slowly in the heat of the desert sun? God, if you hear us, send us someone. God, if you hear us, send someone.
That is correct, Kate. That is Adam Lambert. That is a then unknown Adam Lambert, who now sings as Freddie Mercury with Queen. He was the runner-up on American Idol. Again with the sexy sway. The sway.
Is anybody listening?
See, that's what I'm talking about right there. The Adam Lambert, a then unknown Adam Lambert. So this, again, I'll say it. This should have been a kick-ass production. It had everything going for it. Everything. All right. I feel like I should tell you a little bit more before I tell you the exact details of my run-ins with Val Kilmer. Let me just so I've already prefaced this. How far we're 27 minutes in already. Oh, good Lord. All right. I just want to say something. I'm going to get into the details of my run-ins with Val, but I'm not the only one. All right. Article I put this out on Twitter, Entertainment Weekly, back in the late 90s, I think it was, detailing how hated Val Kilmer is in Hollywood. I want you to know. Well, I'll tell you in a minute. Richard Stanley, who directed Kilmer for 3 days on the island of Dr. Moreau before being fired, said Val would arrive, an argument would happen, and 3 days later, the director is fired. New director, John Frankenheimer, he's going to fix everything, right? Frankenheimer says, I don't like Val Kilmer. I don't like his work ethic. I don't want to be associated with him ever again. People in Hollywood don't say this about actors. This is a big money, multi-million dollar contracted actor, and directors are saying this guy's an a-hole. All right. So I'm not the only one. In fact, John Frankenheimer, the director of Island of Dr. Moreau, actually has a great line about Val Kilmer. He said, Will Rogers never met Val Kilmer. Remember, Will Rogers' famous line is, I never met a man I didn't like. Yeah, Will Rogers never met Val Kilmer. Joel Schumacher, director of the Batman movie that Val Kilmer was in, described how a couple of weeks into filming, they got into a shoving match. He was being irrational, went ballistic on the first assistant director, the cameraman, the costume people. And then Schumacher went on to say he was rude and inappropriate. I was forced to tell him that this would not be tolerated for one more second. Then we had 2 weeks where he didn't speak to me. It was bliss. At the end of shooting the Batman movie that Val Kilmer was in, when they were doing the publicity tour for the film, when everybody's saying all great things about the movie, a person asked Joel Schumacher, the director of the Batman movie, tell us what it was like working with Val Kilmer. Now, again, this is the publicity tour for the Batman movie. And Joel Schumacher looked at the reporter on camera and said, I wouldn't cast Val Kilmer to play Val Kilmer in the Val Kilmer movie. So I just feel like it's important for me to preface all of this by saying, this isn't a me thing. Okay, it's not just me. So we start rehearsing this show, and the producer had an interesting concept, and I was totally on board with it. Instead of using a rehearsal room, we actually used a soundstage at Paramount Studios. It was actually very cool to rehearse on a soundstage, and I got to drive onto the Paramount lot every day for rehearsal. And we actually brought part of the set in because we're on a soundstage with like a rigging system and lighting. And we actually we had the actors actually rehearse on what would be close to the actual set, which is very rare. Usually actors rehearse in a bare rehearsal room, and then they have maybe a week on set, and then they are in front of an audience. But these actors actually got to know the rake of the stage and some of the scenic elements. So that was kind of cool. And so we were able to utilize this soundstage, and we're on the Paramount Studios to rehearse this whole thing in Hollywood. And of course, people have to understand theater is very different than film and television. People don't have trailers, right? Especially during rehearsal. You know, you show up in your rehearsal clothes, you do your thing, everyone sort of hangs out together. It's all one big family. It's none of this, you know, I've got my space, I've got your space. We go into our trailers, we get isolated. Very different, right? And the cast rehearses for a couple of weeks before Val Kilmer arrives. But we're under the impression that Val Kilmer is learning his lines and learning his music, and he's going to arrive when he arrives fully prepared with all of his lines and all of his songs. And he did not. He did not. In fact, he arrived as though he had just opened the script in the car on the way over to Paramount Studios for rehearsal. And the first thing he did when he got to Paramount Studios was demand a dressing room. And we said to Val, well, you're not going to be changing into any costumes. So what? Honestly, I'm a theater guy, okay? I'm not used to working with, but that's not true. I had worked with movie actors before. I had worked with Ian McKellen. I had worked with Glenn Close. I had worked with several other Hollywood actors that I can't remember right now. None of them had asked for a dressing room for rehearsals, but he wanted a dressing room. So we worked it out. We found an office space on the soundstage because soundstages don't have dressing rooms. When you're working on a film or a television project on a soundstage, they have trailers that you use. We found an office that we converted into a dressing room for Val Kilmer. This is again for 10 Commandments, the musical. By the way, for those of you wanting to know what this was in 2004 when all of this happened. 2004. So Val gets his room. So he gets his dressing room, we set him up, everything's fine, and then we come in and check on Val. And then Val asked. I say asked for. He didn't ask for it. He demanded. Val then demanded a full audio studio to be built in his dressing room. He wanted a microphone, a speaker system, mixer, synthesizer for the musical director to come in and play the songs while he sang into this microphone so he could learn his songs. And so I says to Val, so understand something. My job is to represent the producer. And my job, I have two jobs. My first job is to make sure that everything is running smoothly and that the show is getting up on its feet, on schedule, and on budget. I utterly failed at that. My second job is to keep the cast in a good frame of mind. You know, I'm representing the producer, but I got to be the bad guy sometimes and you know, enforce the producer's laws and enforce the contract and things like that. But at the same time, I can sort of, you know, be on the actor's side and I go back and petition to the producer on behalf of the actors. That's sort of general manager, sort of a middleman there. And so, but I was never used to that. So Val Kilmer says, you know, I want this sound system and I want to have a big studio microphone like I'm in a sound stage or like in a recording studio so I can practice all my songs. And I said, well, Val, that doesn't make any sense. You're doing this live on stage. You're going to have a microphone, but it's a body microphone. You're not going to be singing into a big microphone. And he totally unprofessional. So Val Kilmer, you see on screen, is like really mild-mannered and quiet and really soft-spoken, right? And that's how he is in person. And then he screams at me, "This is my process." This is his process. So the only way he can learn and practice the songs for the show that he was supposed to have already learned before he showed up for rehearsal was to have a full audio studio built in the dressing room that he wasn't even supposed to have in the first place at the soundstage where we're rehearsing a live theatrical event. So, of course, we didn't budget for any of this, but we did it. We figured it out. We made it happen. We made it happen. For God's sake, we got to keep the star happy. So now this was the first mistake, because as soon as you let a star know that you're going to accommodate them, well, they just keep asking for things and asking for things. Well, not asking, of course, demanding things. So one night, I think it would be about 2 weeks before opening for the show, Val Kilmer's son, I guess, Jack, is now an actor, right? Jack Kilmer's out there. At the time, Jack was about 10 or 11 years old, I want to say. And Jack was living with him over this summer while we were rehearsing. He had rented a home in the Hollywood Hills, and Jack was around sometimes. And another sibling, can't remember his name, I'm sorry. And oh, no. His agent was an enabler, Sylvie. Thank you for asking. The agent was a big enabler of all of these things. He's an agent. He doesn't work for, he works for Val. He gets his 10%. So the agent was demanding everything on his behalf as well. So he asks us, he says, "Hey, can you ask the folks at Paramount if I want to do something for the cast. I want to throw a party for the cast. We're 2 weeks away from opening, and I want to throw a party because we've been working so hard, and Jack really wants a party. So can we use the screening room?" So they have a screening room there on the Paramount lot. They have two big screening rooms, one giant screening room for those of you in LA, which is right off the main gate. It's huge. It's beautiful. And then there's this smaller, like, historic screening room, a classic historic screening room that the folks from Paramount back in like the 30s used to screen films, right? And he asked if he could, and this screening room, this smaller screening room, it's like a movie theater. I'm calling a screening room. It's a movie theater. It's a little movie theater. It's a little private movie theater on the Paramount lot. It happened to be right next to the soundstage that we were using for rehearsals. And at the time, the Anchorman movie was out. And Val, of course, because he's Val Kilmer, he got a print of the Anchorman movie, and he wanted to screen Anchorman for the cast for a party one night, right before their day off. So they said, sure, we'll make it happen. So we talked to Paramount. Hey, Val Kilmer's asking for this. Can we do this for you? Absolutely, we'll do that. And we get the screening room for him. So we have a party. Now, I don't stick around for the party because I'm done with my long day's work. I want to go home to my two young children, my 5-year-old and my 3-year-old, and my wife at the time. And I'm done with my work for the day. So they're having the party. They're doing their screening. Why do I need to stick around for that? The next day is our day off. I get a phone call from Paramount. The screening room is destroyed. The screening room has been trashed. I drive to Paramount. I go in, and this historic screening room, the walls have been defaced. They had taken, I don't know if it was like silly string or something, and they had like sprayed lines from the movie Anchorman on the walls. They had dumped popcorn and crap everywhere and ground it into the carpet and the upholstery. They had, I think they had damaged one of the curtains. I mean, this party got way out of hand. And I called one of the actors that I knew in the show that I had worked with on several productions, and I said, "What happened last night?" And they said, "Well, Val got a little carried away. Moses got a little carried away, and Moses and his son Jack, his little son, trashed and defaced this historic movie theater on the Paramount lot, which of course now the producer had to pay for to fix. And of course it happened on my watch. So now things are starting to get tense with Val Kilmer. And I have to have a sit down with Val. And I said, "Val, this is a problem. You destroyed property. You destroyed Paramount property. What are we going to do about this?" And I swear to God, that smirk that he has in Top Gun, frickin' Iceman is staring back at me, and he smirks and he goes, "I don't know. What are you going to do about it?" Do you see why I need cocktails for this? So we end up having to pay for all this out of the show's budget, of course. And of course, the producer's on my ass because this happens on my watch. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm used to dealing with, adults. I'm used to dealing with professionals. You threw Val Kilmer at me. All right, this isn't my fault. I didn't suggest. I wanted to cast Adam Lambert as Moses. Sure, he was a little young, but he could make it. We got makeup. So what are you going to do about it? So I did a little research and I called a friend of mine in Hollywood. He worked for CAA, the big agency. And I said, what do you know about Val Kilmer? And he goes, oh, he's a monster. And I said, well, okay, I get that. But what is like, how do you deal with him? How do you handle him? And he said, well, here's the problem with Val Kilmer. Whenever he's on a movie, he always isolates one person. He finds one person, either the director or somebody who works for the director or the producer or somebody who works for the producer, and he basically makes a villain out of them. And he turns them into an enemy. And he isolates them. And he just relentlessly, he'll be charming and wonderful and perfect and beautiful. And he'll be Val Kilmer, the movie star, to everybody else. But to that person, especially if it's somebody who represents the production, he will absolutely make them an enemy and spend all of his time making their lives miserable. And as he's telling me this, I'm on the phone hearing it. It's like, oh my God, that's me. That's me. He has picked me. So we make it to the theater and we get on stage, and we're now about 5 days away from our first audience. And Val Kilmer does not know his lines. We are rehearsing. We're trying. And by the time, so for those of you in the theater business who know about these sort of things, by the time you get to the theater and actually on stage working with, now we have to do all the tech. This is where the lighting people and the scenic people and the sound people and all of the tech people make the magic of the show happen on the stage. At this point, by the time you get to the theater, the actors are done. We're done rehearsing the actors. You know your lines, for God's sake. You know your songs. You know your blocking. You know your choreography. We might have to change some things if a scene's not working. This is a new show, so we might have to throw out a song. But you need to know your show by the time we get to the theater. Moses did not know probably 7 of his 10 commandments. He was good on coveting. Oh, he had coveting down. So we had issues, and we're about to have an audience. All right. So it's now decided that we do something that is never done in live theater. We install giant widescreen television sets in the boxes left and right of the house. And we hire professional teleprompters to sit in the basement of the theater to scroll the lyrics of the songs and the lines for the actor. The highest paid actor I believe he was making close to 7 figures a week to play Moses in 10 Commandments, the musical. And we have this cast of 60 professional Broadway actors. I mean, I just showed you the cast. They're brilliant. They're wonderful. And we're hiring a teleprompter for Moses, a teleprompter for Val Kilmer. And oh, by the way, he still screwed up his lines and his lyrics. So now I've got to find teleprompters. Now, thankfully, in Los Angeles, we've got a lot of teleprompter operators. Well, except for the night of the Emmys. I'll get to that story in a minute. So we're going through tech, and we are, I want to say, a night before our first audience. And understand, I mean, this was still rather early. What you see on stage right now for theater is extraordinary. What we're able to do on stage with special effects, especially the integration of video on stage, is remarkable. Absolutely phenomenal. 2004, not so much. But we decided, there was a new advent of integrating video on stage with live theatrical productions. And we decided that we were going to start experimenting with this because that's how we would do the 10 plagues, right? It's like, how are you going to do, locusts, and how are you going to turn the river bloody, and how are you going to part the Red Sea, and how are you going to do the marching through the the wilderness with the pillar of fire and the pillar of smoke and the Egyptians and the chariots, right? It's like, how do you do 10 commandments on stage? And well, we sort of figured we'd use video. We'd have video screens, but we could also project video. Like we'd project locusts, all over the stage and on the actors, like a lighting effect and a video effect. It was not bad actually, but it was not an easy show to tech, and we had to work on the tech. And for those of you who have ever worked on a live theatrical production, the tech process is tedious at best. It's step by step, it's cue to cue, it's you move from one lighting cue to the next or one visual cue, and you got to redo it, but you need the actors to be there for it. And it's a long and tedious process, but professional theatrical actors are used to this. They understand, they get it. Not Val Kilmer. So we have these days, they're called 10 out of 12s, which means the equity actors are working 10 out of 12 hours. They end up getting 2 1-hour breaks, but it is a, like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. day, 12 hours with 2 1-hour breaks, maybe 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's a long day. They're called 10 out of 12s. There's a lot of work being done. And people's nerves are fried, and we're on deadlines, and we're always running behind, and it's just a tense atmosphere. I haven't seen my kids in like 2 weeks. So we're going through this process, and my wife at the time, Sabrina, she brings our 2 daughters, Quinn and Veronica. They're 5 and 3. She brings them to the theater to just visit me during breaks. And actually, strangely enough, my daughter's godmother is visiting, and she comes to check out the show too. It's Lea Salonga, the Tony Award-winning Broadway actress from Miss Saigon, Les Miserables. She was Jasmine and Mulan in the Disney movies. Lea Salonga is a friend, and she happened to be in town, and she came to visit too. So I've got my friend, Tony Award-winning Broadway actress Lea Salonga. I've got my wife at the time, Sabrina, and I've got my 2 little girls who love their daddy. And it's great to see their daddy, running and managing this show with this big stuff. It's a big deal. And so they come to visit me. So they're hanging out. They're watching the tech rehearsal in one of the theatrical boxes. And we're going cue to cue, and we got the production tables out in the house. And we're doing one of our special effects. And Val Kilmer, God bless that man, Val Kilmer is on the stage dressed in his Moses costume, and he's got his body mic on, right? And he starts, we're pausing because we're tinkering with one of the effects. And he starts on his microphone so everybody can hear him because his mic happens to be hot. He starts making fun of the designer's work. He's making fun of the sets. He's making fun of the lighting. He's making fun of the special effects. He's making fun of the video. He's criticizing it all. I just showed you what the production looked like. It's a good looking production, right? I've got more clips that I want to show you. But was it pristine Phantom of the Opera? Of course not. We didn't have that kind of budget, but it was pretty well done. And he starts mocking all of this and criticizing it and saying how amateur it looks and how bad it looks and how stupid it looks and how unbelievable it is. And of course, when you're an actor on stage looking at a video effect, it's not the same impression that the audience gets, but that doesn't matter. Show some class. The designers, the artists who created that product that he's making fun of are sitting there in the audience. They're there. It's like laughing at an artist's life work in front of him while he's sitting there. It was one of the most disrespectful things I've ever seen in my career in theater. And it was rude, and it was completely uncalled for, and it's never done. That sort of thing. Your lead actor doesn't feel comfortable with the set or with the costumes or the design, and then you come and talk and you have a conversation like a grown-up. You don't get on your microphone with your voice booming throughout the theater for everybody to hear, and you criticize an artist's work. So I grab the sound designer, my friend Phil Allen, is right next to me. The soundboard's next to me. I grab his mic, and I get on the mic. I've got my little general manager's table out there. And all I said was, please do not criticize the designer's work in their presence. It's inappropriate. Thank you. I swear to God, that's all I said. I said, please, and I said, thank you. And all I said was, because I want to stand up and protect the dignity of these designers. Please don't criticize the designer's work in front of them. It's inappropriate. Thank you. Well, Val Kilmer turns to me. He knows it's my voice. And we've already, right? He turns to me out in the darkness and he says, F you, this is my show, and I'll do whatever the F I want. Of course, he didn't say F. So now I'm going to admit, I probably could have handled this better. I'm going to say it right now. I probably could have handled this better. But I was just as fried and tired and spent as everybody else in that theater. And I set down the microphone and I turned to Phil and I said, kill his mic. And yes, thank you, Jeff. My family is sitting there. My family is sitting there. So I tell Phil, kill his mic. And I go walking down the aisle and I go up the stairs and I stand on stage and I get right in front of him. And I said, no, Val, this is not your show. This show belongs to the producer. This show belongs to your castmates. This show belongs to the orchestra. This show belongs to the investors. This show belongs to the audience. This show belongs to the writers. This is a cooperative effort, and we're all working together to try to make you look good. And you're fighting us every step of the way. And the only way we're going to make it to our first performance, to opening night, is if you jump on board and change your attitude. And he looked at me, and I swear to God, I saw the fear in his eyes. Now, let me pause for a moment. I want to tell you that I realize now in retrospect that he was terrified. This guy he should have never taken this job. He had to do 8 live shows a week in a 3,000-seat theater, singing a musical that he had no business singing because he doesn't have the voice. He couldn't memorize his lines, or he chose not to memorize lines because I think he wanted to get fired. He was terrified because he knew he couldn't hack it. And I saw this flash of fear in his eyes. And he looked at me and he said something, and again, I'm paraphrasing him because I don't remember his exact words. And nobody else does either because everyone was off mic. It was just the two of us talking as two men in the middle of a very big stage, in the middle of a very big theater. But he said something like, well, then you go ahead and do this on your own because I'm done. And he walked. And he got in his car and he drove away. And so now I'm left on the stage realizing that my job, and the producer's not there. I'm there. I'm representing the producer. And Val Kilmer, the star of the show, whose name is on the posters everywhere, his face is on the posters, who's the reason people have been buying tickets, he just quit the show. We're 2 days away from the first performance. And I've just driven him off the set. And I've just ruined the show. And it's all my fault. So I said, I don't need a microphone, as you can well imagine. So I said, all right, let's keep going with the rehearsal, please. Val's not feeling well. And I asked the guy who plays Aaron, I'll show you in this next clip, he was the understudy for Moses. And I called him from the wings. I forget his name now. Sorry. And I said, can you come here? I said, can you step in for Val for the rest of the rehearsal? And I kid you not, the actor says, I've been waiting for this moment the entire And so I said, all right, let's continue, please. And we keep rehearsal going. And I start walking down to the stage. And I kid you not, the designers who were sitting in the audience, they all stood up and did. So I was their hero, but I was Val Kilmer's enemy. But wait, it doesn't end there. This was the ugliest moment. Well, that wasn't the ugliest moment. It actually got uglier because he did come back. He did open the show, obviously, because you've seen the videos here. But this was just it continued. And I'll show you more in a minute. Let's take a quick break. I want you to see more of the show. I've picked another scene where Val. So here, this is a great example of what happened with this show. They wrote this musical, they cast Val Kilmer, and then they realized he can basically only sing about 6 notes. So they then had to rewrite every song to accommodate his lack of ability of singing. So when you watch, this is the song they sing at the very end after they get the 10 commandments and they put them in the Ark of the Covenant. It's so weird to me that we did all of this on stage as a musical. We parted the Red Sea. We had the Ark of the Covenant. We had the tablets. We had the pillar of fire. We had the Egyptians and the Sphinx. What the hell were we thinking? Anyway, this is basically the finale song. This is the song they sing after they have received the 10 commandments from the Lord. And they say, and this was supposed to be a solo for Val Kilmer. Okay. Now I want you to see how we restaged it and we wrote it to accommodate the fact that Moses couldn't sing. Here we go. Okay, so that would be the Ark of the Covenant, as you see. We put the tablets inside the Ark of the Covenant, and there's the holiest of holies right there, right in front of everyone, right in front of God and well, literally God and everyone. And now Moses will turn and sing, and he's going to sing here. He's going to sing. Don't get me wrong, he absolutely sings. But watch how this song is done to accommodate Val.
Here on earth there's a light that shines. When it's darkest you can find it in each other's eyes. Here on earth there's a brotherhood we share. When destruction casts a shadow on good men everywhere. There's no victory in the suffering of others. There's no joy to be found in the pain.
All right, so he's singing the verse, which is, again, 6 notes. No range, 6 notes. The actor playing Aaron, if you know the Exodus story, is about to sing, take up the melody of the song. This actor, the guy who's about to sing, is the actor who is Val Kilmer's understudy. He hated him. Like I said, he was like, I've been waiting for this moment the entire time. He couldn't wait to play Moses. He was great as much. He actually went on for many performances later in the run, which I'll explain later. But here, just so you know, every time the song gets challenging, where you actually need a singing voice, another actor steps in to sing it. And this first actor is his understudy.
Pain of another. Say a prayer for each other, a prayer for our souls, say a prayer for the young, and a prayer for the old.
For the tears of the innocent and children everywhere, say a prayer for life.
Here on earth we must draw each other near. Our faith will not divide us, only our fear. Here on earth we must open our eyes, see that love is all we have to get us through this life. When the armor we wear is all stripped away, beyond right and wrong, we're all the same. Say a prayer.
And a prayer for cold, say a prayer for the hungry, living on their road.
They literally interrupt him and say, no, we got this. We got this, Moses. No, we got every single time. because he can't. This was supposed to be his solo. Also, do you notice he's looking left and right when he sings? Because he's still reading the teleprompters. This is 10 weeks into the run when we shot this film.
For all creatures on the earth and people everywhere, sing a prayer for the helpless, a prayer for the small, for the wrong, and the wounded, living with their scars, the tears to the innocent, children everywhere. May we each in our own way sow the seeds of peace in every small word, in every small deed. May the roots grow strong and deep, till one day the tree of life bears the fruit of what we believe.
Okay, that's one note. He got one note.
Children everywhere. Say a prayer for the lonely, a prayer for the poor. Say a prayer for the desperate who are living on their own. For all creatures on the earth and people everywhere. Say a prayer. Say a prayer for
Well, there you go. That's that's. I know you can see what's in my playlist there. Lots of Catholic podcasts. That's the big finale song. Say a prayer. Say a prayer. So that's there's Val singing. You got to see Val Kilmer singing. Now that film, now there's a story behind the making of that film, which also is part of why I hate Val Kilmer. First of all, I hope you already understand why I hate Val Kilmer. And again, I just want to reiterate, I recognize he has throat cancer. And he's, now he's America's sweetheart, but he's a terrible person. You can be dying of cancer and still be a terrible person. I don't want him to die. I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him to feel pain. I pray for him. Sure, why not? But but he's a terrible person. So the producer is losing money. Say a prayer for Val's non-vocal abilities. Exactly, Sylvie. If you're gonna say a prayer for Val to be able to sing more than half an octave. Did you know? So earlier in the show, you saw this scene where he was like dressed like the Egyptian prince that he is, right? Hey God.
to look them in the eye, that I belong in the dust of their feet. One day, their sea.
Hey God.
Does anybody here?
Okay, so see this costume? He's topless, right? He's just wearing his little Egyptian skirt. This right here, can you see my mouse? You can, yeah. So that right there, that's a girdle. That's a girdle. It sucks. Look at this dude. This dude's working out, man. This is a Broadway dancer with a kick-ass body. Val Kilmer, not so much. So they had to put a girdle. They built a girdle into the costume to accommodate his pot belly. See, look, you can see it hanging over right there. Okay, so there's the girdle.
Father, can you hear me?
It makes you a slave.
Hold on, that's a good shot. All right, so you can see it doesn't quite do the trick when we have the screenshot. And I kid you not, he had a makeup person. A makeup person did all of his makeup, and then they drew lines as if he had stomach muscles. They actually put shading in here to give him a six-pack, and it's like, who are we kidding? Seriously, man. Who are we kidding, Moses? So there's that. You can see his little belly hanging out.
Of the Pharaoh.
I love it.
Come on.
Because see, all the other actors look like this. I mean, literally, I think one of the other dancers was literally a Chippendales dancer. These were incredibly fit, wonderful Broadway stars that I loved very much, and I loved working with them. And honestly, I mean, many of my run-ins with Val here had to do with either protecting these designers who I loved and brought on board to this project that he was, or the actors who deserved better because they were working their ass off for him. So yes, we actually notice how none of the other Egyptians have a girdle, right? You notice how neither do the Hebrew slaves. Adam Lambert doesn't have any girdle, right? Look at none of the other people who are topless have that. See, they all have very small belts. But Moses has a big belt.
That I belong in the dust of their feet. One day for sure I'm gonna die. Is anybody listening?
Yeah, that was Ramses. Ramses didn't have a girdle. See, Ramses just has a regular little low profile belt there, Ramses. But no, Moses has the girdle. All right. So we're in performances now. And it's the Emmy Awards. Okay, so the Emmy Awards were in September, I think. I think we opened. Yeah, I want to say we opened early September, late September. We had the Emmy Awards, and here's the problem with the Emmy Awards. The Emmy Awards, any of the award shows in Los Angeles, whether it's the, I just want to know where can I hear the understudy more, right? I know, Kimberly, he's fantastic. He's got a voice, and so did everybody in the show had a great voice, except Val Kilmer. So, in LA, awards nights, whenever you've got an award show, whether it's the Oscars or the Emmys or the Grammys or whatever, that is like Christmas morning if you are a teleprompter operator. Okay, there is a small community of teleprompter operators, especially for live events. You know, teleprompters for like a TV show or for actually, most TV shows like The Tonight Show and things like that, they just use cue cards, right? TV news uses teleprompters. But for a live event, you got to have a teleprompter. For an award show, you have to have a teleprompter. So it was the night of the Emmys, and we had no teleprompter operator because they get, quadruple time to go and work the Emmys. I mean, they could. And when we first created this teleprompter situation, we told Val, okay, we'll do this just through rehearsals. And then it's like, okay, we'll do this just during previews. But as of opening it, we can't have them there for opening night. We don't want the critics to see the teleprompter. Well, of course, it continued weeks into the run of the show. It was his crutch. And so it comes Emmy Awards night, and there's no one to operate the teleprompter. We couldn't get anybody. I said, I'm sorry, we can't do it. And it's an hour before the show, and he said, well, I'm not going on. And again, I want to extend him as much grace as possible. Obviously, he didn't want to look like a fool. But if he looked like a fool because he didn't learn his lines, it's because he made himself look like a fool. Because he got paid $1 million a week to be a stage actor, and stage actors learn their lines. Learn your freaking lines. Everybody else on the show learned their lines. And so we said, well, then if you're not going on, you're not going on. And we pulled the understudy that day. We pulled the understudy for that performance because he couldn't go on if he didn't have his teleprompter. Now, eventually, I think in like the final week of the show, we pulled the teleprompters. I don't know why. Like at that point, what's the point, right? So the producer is losing money hand over fist. Week after week, the producer is losing money. He's losing money. And I calculate by this time, he has lost probably about $12 or $13 million, which that's not counting Val Kilmer's contract, by the way. That's just on the production, the theater rental, this huge cast. I mean, it's a giant cast. He's lost a lot of money. Let's say, you know what? I don't want to overstate. Let's say it's $10 million. Let's say it's $10 million. And I'm talking to the producer. He wanted to take this to New York. He wanted to take it on tour. It got really bad reviews. I actually think the show wasn't bad. If we had a better actor playing Moses, we probably would have gotten better reviews. So the producer calls me in for a meeting, and he says, I'm going to write this off as a loss, right? I said, you don't really have any other choice. I said, I mean, the only other thing that you can do is you could bring cameras into the theater, and you can maybe film this, and then you can sell it for residual, ancillary income, after the show closes. You see, in theater, you only make money when you sell tickets for that night's performance, right? In movies, like right now, you could buy the DVD of 10 Commandments, the musical, and the producer will make a little bit of money off that sale, right? 20 years later, you can make that money. And I said, the only other income stream you can create off of this show is if we did a recording, so people could buy the CD. At the time, it was CDs instead of downloads. Or you could make a movie out of it. And he said, well, work up a budget for how much it would cost to film this. I said, all right, I'll put together the budget. You got to pay the actors you pay them like a bonus. They get paid an extra week's salary basically to do a movie. It's called a buyout in the equity contract, but they love it because they get to be on film, and it's a cool experience and all that jazz. And you pay the stagehands a little extra money and all this stuff, but it's totally doable. And I put together the budget for him. I said, so Val Kilmer was never on my budget. Val Kilmer was on a separate budget. His salary was negotiated outside of the theatrical contract. It was a direct negotiation with the producer, and I never paid him. It just can't, right? So I didn't know what Val was going to cost. I said, so listen, here's your budget, but I don't know, what the extra money is for Val. And the producer looks at me with this giant smile on his face. And he said, there's no language in the contract that says that I can't film Val. And I said, I'm sorry, what? And he said, yeah, the contract that I negotiated, I had my lawyers look through it, and it's a special services contract. It's not a typical equity contract, or it's not even a actor's contract. It's a special services contract. It delineates his duties to me, the producer, and to the show, and there's nothing in there that precludes me from filming his performance and selling it for commercial use. And I'm like, hold on a minute, Max. This is Max Osria, the fashion designer, BCBG Max Osria. I said, Max, are you telling me that you're basically going to you're going to produce, film, and distribute a Val Kilmer movie for less than $15 million? And he said, yep. I said, oh my God, this is it. This is the only, I said, listen, I don't know if you're going to make any money off of this, but that's the only chance you have of making money. You're basically able to distribute a movie of Val Kilmer. And then, this is 2004. Val Kilmer, So we put it all together. And I negotiate the deals with all the unions. I negotiate with the stagehands union, and with the wardrobe union, and with the designers, and with the actors union, and with the musicians union. And they all get special bonuses. And the actors are thrilled. These are kids. Listen, these aren't stars. They got a great job in Los Angeles. They got to work for about 6 months all told between rehearsals and the performances. They got a production contract salary, which is like work. It was just like working in New York. Okay. But they got to be in LA. It was high profile. They had a blast doing it. And now they get an extra week's pay for 2 days work to come in and shoot this thing. We shot the film during the day, and then we would do a show that night, right? And we brought in an audience for free to come and watch it. So we had audience reaction during the show. And so they all got to come in for 2. They were thrilled. They said, this is great. It's and it was right before Christmas, by the way. We shot this, I want to say, the first week of December. So it was like extra money for them right before Christmas, like having a bonus. We were supposed to close. I think we closed December 20th, I want to say. So they were thrilled. The actors loved it. They loved it, that they all got extra money. They could come in, they could do this thing, and then they would have a DVD, and they could put it on their reel because they all wanted to be movie actors. They could say, look, I'm at a movie, and I'm with Val Kilmer. And it was great. Great news all around. Fabulous. The night before we are scheduled to shoot the film, we do a show. We have a performance the night before. Remember when Val Kilmer was in that Oliver Stone movie? No, not The Doors. Not not the good one. No, 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 no. Remember when he was in the Oliver Stone movie? It came out in 2004. It was called Alexander. Yes. Remember about Alexander the Great with Colin Farrell? You remember that? Well, Oliver Stone's Alexander, starring Colin Farrell and Val Kilmer, was going to be released that Christmas, right around the time we were shooting this movie, right around the time Val Kilmer was starring on stage every night in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard at the Kodak Theater in 10 Commandments, the musical. The night before we're supposed to film for posterity this production of 10 Commandments, the musical, Colin Farrell came to see the show. And Colin Farrell was a really big Hollywood star at the time. And so the paparazzi were there. It was a big deal. And after the show, Colin Farrell went backstage into Val's dressing room with his entourage. And Val, of course, had his entourage and his hanger-ons and all the things that go along with being Val Kilmer in Hollywood. And so they go into his dressing room, and there's clearly some celebration going on. This was a night that I happened to stay late. Usually I would go after, by the time intermission came, it's like everything's fine. I'd leave it for my company manager. I'd get out of there. I'd go home so I could be there with the kids when they woke up in the morning. This night I stayed until the end of the show. And as I'm leaving the theater, I hear all this. I pass by Val's dressing room, or the hallway down the hall from Val's dressing room. I'm heading to the stage door, and I hear all this noise coming from Val's dressing room. And I turned to the stage door security guy, and I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "Oh, Val's still partying in there." Val's still partying in there? It's like 11:45. It's almost midnight. We've got an 8 o'clock call tomorrow for the film. So I take a chair and I move and I sit in the hallway right outside Val's door. First, I opened the door to see what was going on. I felt like Lot's wife turning and looking at Sodom and Gomorrah as it was being destroyed. I'm shocked I didn't turn into a pillar of salt. I- there were a lot of people in that room. They were all partying. So I decided I wanted to wait because I wanted to let the producer know what time Val left that night so we could document it. And I stayed, and he stayed till like almost 1 a.m. And Colin Farrell, excuse me, not Colin Firth. Colin Farrell comes stumbling out of the dressing room with his. There were probably 20 people in there. They all started, and my understanding is they went to another party after this. It's Hollywood, I get it, but you got to be on stage and you got to be able to sing for cameras the next day. And Val's the last one to leave with his little, and he started dating this like 20-year-old girl from the chorus, which was really creepy, by the way. And he starts leaving, and he just looks at me, and again with the Iceman smirk, he gives me the smirk as he walks past me, and he stumbles away. So the next day we show up for our call, 8 a.m. Cast is there, tech is there. Who's not there? Val Kilmer's not there. He's half an hour late. We're calling. Val's agent calls, and Val's agent says, Val's sick. Val's sick. He can't come in today. Now we have a full cast. We have the entire orchestra. We have the entire crew. We have the entire running crew for the show. Plus, we have an entire film crew with all of the equipment rented for the day to film the show. And Val Kilmer is calling in sick. And I have to stand up in front of the cast and announce to them that we won't be shooting the film today because Val doesn't feel well. And I did. And I delivered that message. And I have got to tell you, it was one of the most devastating moments because nobody gets paid. Now, you have to understand, the actors showed up. They don't get paid if they don't shoot the film. Nothing happens for them. Okay. If we're not shooting, that's the way the contract works. They get paid if we shoot. Okay. Unlike it, like if we were doing a show, if we had an audience and a performance and we called the cast in and then for some reason we couldn't do the show, they'd still get paid. This isn't a show. This was a rider to the contract to do this film. And they only get paid upon the completion of the film. And these actors were so pissed off at Val because they knew what had happened the night before. And they were all, bearing their souls to me and sharing what, I can't believe he did this to us. He's fucked us. He's done all that. He was very, very angry, very angry. Obviously, and the producer was beside himself because of the money that he had wasted getting the crew there. A week later, we ended up getting him back onto the stage and we did end up shooting the film. And that's the film you see. But every single time when I had to deal with them, it was always the smirk and always the, yeah, go F yourself. I'm Val Kilmer. None of this matters. I don't care about anybody else. It was the most despicable, debilitating episode I'd ever had in live theater. And I worked about 18 years in the business. And it broke me. He was such a horrible human being. Now, listen, maybe he was going through substance abuse problems. Maybe I don't know. But can I tell you something, though? After that, by the way, I went through, there was like a week where I couldn't leave the house. It was like the closest I'd ever been to an actual sort of depression because it was so traumatizing, this experience. And it wasn't just Val. It was the whole show. It was the money that was lost. It was the stress of the show and the size of the production. Last big show I ever worked on, honestly. After that, I worked on, you know what I did? Months after this experience, I ended up starting doing children's productions where I would mount shows with child actors and kids who have never been on stage before because it renewed my love of the craft. And that got me back into the business again. But I kid you not. Do you ever have dreams where you're arguing with somebody and you're shouting at the top of your lungs in your dream and you're shouting so loud that you wake yourself up? Now, in real life, you're like, you're not shouting. In your dream, you're screaming your lungs out, right? At the top of your lungs. But your wife or your husband only hears you just sort of mumbling or talking in your sleep or, but you're obviously angry, right? Do you ever do that? Do you ever have that experience? That happens to me. I'll have dreams where I'm shouting. In my dream, I'm so angry and so mad, and it's just spitting dirt. And I'll wake myself up, and I'll wake Meredith up. And every single time now when it happens, Meredith will roll over to me and say, and she'll look at me and she'll like sort of like stroke my head and say, "Was it Val Kilmer again?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, babe, it was Val Kilmer again." He is still haunting me. That's how bad this experience. Maybe this cathartic experience of finally telling the whole thing about what an awful human being he was. I'm not even telling you all the stories, by the way. I made notes of the biggest ones that I wanted to tell you. But it was constant for this 6-month period. Well, actually, with him, it was a 4-month period. He missed the first 2 months of production. This is one of the reasons why I was eager to leave the theater business when I did and take a new path. I'll admit it. Val Kilmer broke me. He's not my Huckleberry. And so it's very hard for me now. And I was only validated by going back and researching Val even more. And I've shared with you some of the stories of Val Kilmer. It is legendary what Val Kilmer has. I'll give you the link here from Entertainment Weekly. This is from 1996. So, we should have known better. We should have known better when we cast him. But the headline in this Entertainment Weekly, Why Val Kilmer Makes Enemies in Hollywood. And it details all of these stories. Another one from Island of Dr. Moreau. Kilmer lit the end of his cigarette, and then it met the face of a camera operator. Quote, Val was sort of teasing him with the end of his cigarette and burned the guy's sideburn, says Moreau executive, Island of Dr. Moreau. Producer Tim Zimmerman. The guy was upset, naturally, but one who witnessed the incident has a different opinion. He burned the cameraman right on his face, and no, he wasn't fooling around. It was intentional. He eventually apologized to the crew. I'm thrilled that Top Gun Maverick is back in the theaters here. I can't wait to see it, and I'm thrilled that Val Kilmer, I'm told, has some kind of cameo as the Iceman cometh, the Iceman returns. But I can't. I don't know what I'm going to do when I go to see this movie and he shows up on stage, even in his currently debilitated state. Sylvie says, I can't believe he's still haunting you almost 20 years later. It is sad. It's my fault. I need to get over it, Sylvie. Maybe this is it. This is my therapy. You're right, Rob O'Donnell. Therapy and bourbon. Oh, Jessica Taylor is here. Jessica in the OC says, I wish I knew this story years ago. I know. Think about all the times we would get together and we would all, have cocktails and tell stories there in Orange County before I started this career. And I never told you my Val Kilmer's. I alluded to it, though, Jessica. I alluded to this. I would talk about Val now and again. Do you have any questions about Val? Or there are more stories if you really beg me for them. But this is it. This is what I always refer to this. Kurt Schlichter, whenever Kurt Schlichter sees a Val Kilmer story, he always tags me on Twitter with it and tries to poke me and antagonize me. Val Kilmer is a horrible human being. I'm sorry. I'll say it. Listen, if he hears about this, because, the world is small these days with social media. If he wants to have some sort of, reconciliation or talk this all through, if he's willing to acknowledge his behavior, I'd love to talk to him. I would. Seriously. I'm a Christian. I believe in redemption. I believe in forgiveness. Oh, that's the other thing. So Val Kilmer claims, oh, that's another thing. Well, I got another thing for you. Somebody living with all that evil has a black soul. His cameo in Maverick is actually a sad scene, Sylvie says. Rob O'Donnell says he saw Maverick twice. Well worth it. Well, of course, Rob, your son is literally a naval aviator, for God's sake. And God bless him. Here's to Rob O'Donnell's son, who is flying those birds for the Navy right now. Bam! Although Chris and Trisha, I doubt Trisha's still here because we're an hour and a half in now, for God's sake. But Chris and Trisha just saw it at the big IMAX over in at Dulles, at the Ugarhazi, whatever the big space museum is out there, and they loved it too. I'm going to see it. We can't wait to see it. We're going to love it. We're going to absolutely love it, despite his cameo. Here's another story. So Val, first of all, I think that part of Val's brain is fried so he's an immersive actor, apparently. He likes to immerse himself in his roles. And the stories that I've heard, and I heard a lot of Val Kilmer stories in the day, trust me, when he was doing the Doors film and he played Jim Morrison. By the way, I thought he was brilliant as Jim Morrison in the Doors. No, seriously, I thought he was great. I think he's a great actor. That doesn't mean you can be a great actor and not be a great human being, okay? I think we've learned that over the last several weeks. I think when he did the Doors film for Oliver Stone, I don't know this. I have heard this. I am merely relaying to you my opinion based on my observation of his behavior and what I have heard from other people in the entertainment business. I believe he immersed himself in the Jim Morrison role including the chemical substances that Jim Morrison experimented with at the time. He embodied the 60s ethic when he did that film, and I think that may have messed with him. I really do. No, Sharon, Chris Pratt's beard is terrible in this new movie. It looks horrible. This would be great. You're right, Tommy. A three-way. I listen. I love Chris Pratt. I'm merely drawing attention to the fact that his beard looks horrible in the new Terminal List movie. I can't wait to see it. I'm sure he's going to be great. The beard is awful. No, he was great in Tombstone. Marilyn, this is my point. He is a great actor, but he immerses him. And like, for instance, Tombstone, when he played Doc Holliday, I'm told that he like lost 80 pounds or something. And he acted erratic on the set. And he was, he like embodies the role. So here I thought he was going to embody Moses, a saint, a holy man, a savior of sorts. Not so much. He didn't do that. Kind of an asshole. So, which brings me back. The other, I was going to tell you the other story. There were many times he would call in sick. Oh man, I can't do the show today. I got a postnasal drip. It's really hurting my throat. I can't sing. No, you can't sing, but it has nothing to do with congestion, dude. You can't sing, period. All right. So you would call in. I'm sorry, Larry. I can't come in. I can't do the show today. I got a note from my doctor. He got a note from his doctor. Here's the thing. He claimed at the time that he was a Christian Scientist. Go ahead. Google it. Google that shit. Val Kilmer, Christian Scientist. Talked about it all the time. It was his deeply held faith. He told me he was an expert on Moses and the Old Testament and Exodus, and he really embodied the part and really did a ton of research about the Exodus story and about the historic archaeological evidence of Moses and all this stuff. And he was a Christian Scientist. He was raised as a Christian Scientist. It was a big deal. He talked about it all the time. And so when he got sick, he refused to take medicine because he was a Christian Scientist. Now, maybe that works in the movies where you can just sort of suspend filming and everybody's on hold or hiatus for a week, and then you come back and restart the shooting. Can't do that in theater. In theater, every 6 nights a week, you've got audiences sitting in that theater waiting to pay tickets, paid money to see you perform. And if you get sick, you got to take some medicine so you can get back on stage. Now, I'm not, I don't want to get into a fight with anybody over their religious beliefs. But if anybody asks me, hey, what do you know about Val Kilmer, other than all the stories I've told you, about him, one of the top 3 things I'd say about what I know about him just as an individual is that he was a Christian Scientist and that he had a very narrow view of medical intervention and medicine. That I found out he's got throat cancer, and well, he's gone through very serious radiation and chemotherapy treatments. I'm no expert on Christian Scientists, but it seems to me if you can't take decongestant or maybe some steroids to fix your congestion so you can go on stage and fulfill your contract and perform in front of 3,000 people, I think maybe, you might want to call into question whether you should take chemotherapy and radiation. But, that's just me. I'm willing to be corrected. So there's another story. Anyway, I know he's sick. If he wants to meet, if he wants to talk, I don't know why he would. He doesn't remember me. I'm sure I did not make the impression on him that he made on me and my family, by the way. But that's my Val Kilmer story. Do you have any other questions? Rob says that in the documentary Danger Zone, the making of Top Gun, it's covered that he refused to live with the cast and set up housing near the base and lived alone in La Jolla. And he didn't get along with the cast. Well, again, he was immersive. Maybe he decided as Iceman, he had to be separated, right? Oh, Jeffrey, the director. The director is a whole other thing. Listen, there are a lot of disasters associated with 10 Commandments, the musical. Let me just say, the first disaster is this. Now, be honest. Would you pay money to see 10 Commandments, the musical? So right there, it was a tough sell. But the posters were Val Kilmer is Moses in Ten Commandments, the musical. I mean, it sounds like a punchline. When I tell people I worked on this show, they're like, that's not a real thing. Oh, it's a real thing. I've I've shown you. The director of this show actually ended up getting replaced a week after we opened. The director of this show, Rob, was best known at that time for directing a film. I can't even say it. Uh, remember Kelly Clarkson? This was right after Kelly Clarkson won American Idol. And Jason Guarini, the runner-up. Do you remember this era, my friends? This guy, Rob Iannofi, I want to say is his name, off the top of my head. Rob directed the film that was made of Kelly Clarkson and Jason Guarini that they made right after American Idol, where they it was like a takeoff on the old beach movies with Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicelli. Do you remember this? It was a movie about it was a horrible B movie with Kelly Clarkson and Jason Guarini. And that was his that was his resume. And he did some stage shows in LA. Sharon says, faith, politics, and entertainment, you have the receipts. Thank you, Sharon. That's what we try to do on our live streams. Faith, politics, and entertainment. Rob says you should have marketed it as the breaking of the Ten Commandments starring Val Kilmer. We never did that scene when Moses comes out. We did have a pretty good golden calf scene, though. I got to tell you, you've seen how gorgeous the cast is. This is a beautiful cast of dancers wearing hardly any clothes. And I'll tell you, when the Hebrews defied God and started, doing their pagan worship of the golden calf, there wasn't a dry seat in the house. This was a steamy scene. It was a very sexual show, I have to say. Marilyn says his roles have something in common: lost souls. It's true. It's true. Val picks very dark characters, and it's hard for me to see him in movies now without seeing this dark side of him. Sharon, yes, you remember Kelly Clarkson and Jason Guarini. It was a terrible movie. Jeffrey says, don't ever put down the horn for anyone. Don't ever put down the horn for anyone. I'm missing that reference. Yes, From Justin to Kelly was the name of the movie. And if you look, the director of that movie was our director on 10 Commandments, the musical starring Val Kilmer. Listen, Allison Porter was a supporting character, and she went on to win The Voice. And she's a wonderful person. Adam Lambert, an unknown actor, played Joshua. He went on to be runner-up on American Idol and now tours the country as a top act with Queen, singing those incredible Freddie Mercury songs. I love, dining out on that and the fact that was something that I did. But it was still a very dark time. And the only sunny side of this whole thing, it was just such a tumultuous time. I ended up leaving the show a week before it closed. I tendered my resignation. I left right before it closed. And then my son was born. My son Christian was born on December 12th, 2004. That was his birthday. And I think I left the show it was right around right after Thanksgiving. It was like the first week of December when I left the show. Yeah, Adam Lambert with Queen. That's Evie. That's who this is. That's Adam Lambert right there.
Is anybody listening? Does anybody hear? Does anybody out there see us drowning in our tears? Is our future written on the sky of golden stone? God, if you're listening, let us know.
Anyway, you can actually buy this DVD on Amazon. Adam is singing for the Queen. Seriously, is Adam Lambert in London singing for Queen Elizabeth for the Platinum Jubilee? That's awesome. That's phenomenal. Now he's actually a really good kid. He was young, and he had He was still finding himself, let's say. I'll just leave it at that. I have nothing but fond memories of Adam Lambert, though. He was a very sweet guy. Really liked him. Um, I have no idea what I was saying before we went off on that tangent about Adam. But anyway, that's the end of that story. Honestly, I don't know what more I can tell you. It- this is what you get with Larry Unplugged. I'm just going to tell you what happened, and I'll answer your questions. And I think it's weird. I've had a very strange life. Oh, my son. Yes, so my son was born. My son was born on December 12th, and I went through this renewal. Honestly, I think it was February when I could finally get back and work again. I made quite a bit of money on this show, so I was able to take a couple of months off when my son was born, Christian, and I think it was February or March when I started working on a children's show. Somebody was producing a children's show, and they asked me to produce. No, they oh, it was for like a music school in Orange County, California. A friend of a friend had a music school, and she wanted to do a play, a musical for children, and she needed someone to produce and direct it. She had no idea what she was doing, and so they asked if I would do it. And I showed up one day, and I met all the kids, and these are like, from 5-year olds to 12-year olds, and I was like, something. God told me. God, it was God. Let's just say it was God, because it's like it's so natural to say, and then a voice in my head told me. No, it wasn't a voice in my head. It was God. The Holy Spirit touched me and said, "This is what you need to do. This will renew you. This will put your soul back on track, and you will love theater again, because you will be doing this not for people like Val Kilmer. You'll be doing this for children, and you will be able to help children be on stage for the first time in their lives, and you'll see the joy and the renewal and the life spirit that they get from performing on stage." And that's what I did. And I actually ended up doing shows. If Jessica is still there, in Jessica Taylor is still listening, she'll attest to this. I think we ended up doing 12 or 13 shows, children's shows, over the span of like 5 years, that we produced and directed and put on. None of it was for profit, really. We just made enough money to put on the next show, um, and pay for a worldwide cruise, of course. No, I'm kidding. And it was great. It truly did. And can I tell you something? Let me tell you something. This is what's really cool. Okay, I didn't know how I would end this whole thing today, and now I know how I'll end it. Because this project that I did at the end of 2004, going into 2005, this led me, by 2009, so just 4 years later, I was writing for Andrew Breitbart at the big Hollywood sites, and I was doing my live streaming radio show that turned into this radio career that I have now. So those intervening 4 years, I still worked on some professional productions. Nothing as big as this, but I did some readings, some staged readings, some backers auditions. I put together budgets. I still worked in the business, but the main focus for theatrical stuff was this children's theater program that I started to just cleanse myself of the process of working with Val Kilmer. And that put me in a place to be ready to transition out of that part of my life and into this new part of my life. So that was it served a purpose. God is sovereign. God has a plan for all of this. Don't question it, just do it. Okay, go along with it. It may be great, it may suck. God is sovereign. Follow along. He's got you. And that put me on this path to be able to do what I'm doing right now, right? But what I wanted to tell you was, we did this I did this one show. This first children's show. Strangely, it was set in Egypt, which was hilarious because of the Ten Commandments story, right? But this little play, it was called Dig It. It's a little children's musical about kids that go back in time, and they're archaeologists, and they learn about ancient history, and it's put to music. It's an educational show. It was a children's show. But I remember it vividly. It was set in Egypt, which I thought was funny. Egypt and Mesopotamia, right? Which was funny because of Ten Commandments. I was like having PTSD of all the pyramids and stuff from the Val Kilmer show. And then I was like, this is great. We're like doing shows and it actually is turning a profit, and kids are just so wonderful because they love being on stage and they love. So my ex-wife and I, Sabrina and I, conceived this whole children's theater program where we did like 2 or 3 shows a year, all cast with kids, and we made sure that all the kids got to be in the show and actually do something and have a line and perform in the show, not just, be a spear carrier in the back and stuff. And it was great, and I really loved it. And I want to say the second show we did, or maybe the third show we did, there was a little girl who was the same age as my oldest daughter, Quinn. So at the time, maybe she was 6 or 7 years old at the time. No, yeah, I guess by the time we did the show, she was about 7 years old. Quinn was, and this girl that Quinn knew from going to Gymboree, right? Remember Gymboree? Um, and this little girl named Isabella, we met through Gymboree, and we met her mom and knew her mom and stuff, and they knew we were doing children's theater, and so they ended up doing these shows with us. And so Isabella, the first time she was on stage, I was her director. I think we did Godspell, or maybe it was either Godspell or Willy Wonka, something, but it was a little kids children's show. It was great. And she ended up doing all our shows with us. Isabella loved it. Is Jessica still here? Because Jessica, I mean, Jessica's an old friend of mine from back in these days, who's watching on Facebook. But Isabella Wouters, you remember her mother Tamara lived in Fullerton. Anyway, Isabella, at 7 years old, I was her director in her very first play with my daughter Quinn, and we introduced them to performance. We introduced them to live theater. And for me personally, this was this whole cleansing process of getting away from Val Kilmer and all that ugliness and everything that I had to deal with that thing that almost broke my spirit and truly almost put me on the brink of depression. And working with these children saved me. So for me, it was like this therapeutic process, and then it became a little business, and we actually earned money and paid our bills by doing children's theater. And here's this 7-year-old girl, Isabella Wouters, and my daughter, Quinn O'Connor. First time they were ever on stage, I'm their director, and we do these plays, and they end up doing all these plays with us. It is now the first week of June, 2022, and those 2 7-year-old girls, Isabella Wouters and Quinn O'Connor, are now 22-year-old girls, ladies, young women. And next week, a week from tomorrow, on June 10th, both of them together will graduate from the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. Isabella, after she graduates, will continue her dream and her pursuit of a career in acting. And my daughter will pursue her career in stage management and producing. That same little girl, both of those little girls that I ended up doing children's theater with 15 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I hate Val Kilmer, but that experience put me on this path. Put me on this path to do the things that I've done since then. And in its own way, it put my daughter and little Isabella on their path to do what they're doing. And probably without that horrible experience with Val Kilmer, it wouldn't have happened. So I guess that's the Kilmer Chronicles. This is how I learned to hate Iceman. But now that I think about it and actually reflect on it in this moment, I guess, all right, I'll say it. Thank you, Val Kilmer. My life is really good right now. In a weird way, it's because of you. So let me end this on an up note. Thank you, Val Kilmer, for being such an asshole. Guys, we're going to call it a night. I've got an early wake up tomorrow, as you know. If you enjoyed yourself tonight, please share this. We're going to keep this live for a while, so you can share it on Facebook, share it on YouTube, share it on Twitter, wherever. I think we had some fun and we revealed some interesting unknown stories tonight. And if you want more of this, please join our community at Locals. It's been scrolling across the bottom of the screen all freaking night. LarryO'Connor.locals.com. It's free to join. All right. It's just like joining any other social media platform. You sign up, you contribute as much as you want. Now, there you will see some content behind a paywall. It's for supporters only. It's cheap to support if you want to. And by the way, you can join for free right now. You can be a supporter for free. If you're watching on Facebook, just use Larry FB as your code. Larry FB for Facebook. On YouTube, it's Larry YT for YouTube. And if you found us through Twitter, it's Larry TW for Twitter. And if you didn't use any of those social media platforms, then it's Larry FU. It's true. That'll work. Larry FU. But either way, you can join for free and you can see our subscriber content as well. We give you stuff every single day. You get our show rundowns from the morning show, so you can see all the stories we worked on, all the links to the stories, and all the content that only I get and my producer Heather Hunter and our co-hosts and everything. It's our exclusive show content that you see for the show prep. You also see I do at least 2 or 3 live streams a week that's exclusive to Locals, and a whole lot of other posts. And you can post on my page too, whatever stories you see and stuff like that. So that's that. Join us, be a part of what we're doing, and I really appreciate you all being here tonight. This was fun, and good Lord, it's almost 9 o'clock Eastern. I've got to get to bed. I have to wake up very early tomorrow. We'll see you on the radio. Thank you, everybody, for tonight. I appreciate it. That was fun.